All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to another video. And today we're going to be doing yet another request. This is coming in from Senior Pepe Jr., who asked me if I would be able to take a look at creating the X-Wing flight suit from Star Wars. And so I figured I would go and jump in on this. I'm not going to do this as a full-on start to finish tutorial, but I'll kind of show you. I'll take a look at some of the bits and pieces, some of the things that I've done in the past that will lead you into creating this, and then I'll show you kind of the starting bits and pieces of getting this going, kind of tackling some of the more difficult elements. So first of all, we need to talk about subject matter. When I hear the X-Wing flight suit being mentioned as a source of design here, you know, my brain instantly goes to Luke, and I think of Luke in Empire, and in wearing that outfit, or at the end of Episode 4, where he's wearing the orange jumpsuit that we typically see with the X-Wing pilots. Now, what's really interesting, this is one of the things I love about Star Wars, is that back when they made these films in the 70s and 80s, you know, a lot of what they used was found. You know, they had a lot of their visual effects, their practical effects, their costumers, a lot of the things that they used to make the props and the costumes and everything. They would have a lot of these people go down to junk stores and thrift stores, mostly in the UK where they were filming, and just buy things in bulk, things that they could use over and over and over again. And Luke's flight suit would have been one version of this. You see variations of this suit throughout Star Wars, worn by not only the X-Wing pilots, but Bosk here too in Empire wears a variation of this kind of suit. You can see he's got the white kind of bib vest on as well that you see. Boba Fett wore one similar as well. And even this, I mean, when you look at the origin of where this comes from, you know, this is an old episode of Doctor Who that we're looking at here. But even this, like, it comes from an old, I believe it's actually Russian. Correct me if I'm wrong. But I think this is an old Russian flight suit that would have been kind of the source of what they did, you know. So they kind of got these things at, you know, would have been some kind of a thrift shop or something like that, and, you know, repurposed it or dyed it. You know, in some instances they probably just reverse engineered the pattern, you know, and they were able to generate their own pattern from it, to create something that, you know, looked kind of otherworldly and looked like it belonged in this universe of Star Wars. You know, it was one thing that was Star Wars was kind of brilliant for, was the used universe. The fact that everything looked like it had been there for years, nothing was clean, everything kind of looked like it had this layer of scum on it. And so that's one of the things that kind of really sells this stuff as being Star Wars-y. So I'm looking here at Mark Hamill in the flight suit. And then there's a depiction of something similar here on what looks like a mannequin or something of that nature. If we go back and do a search here, so I'm just going to search in for Star Wars X-Wing pilot suit sewing pattern. This is usually one of my first steps in creating these flight suits or costumes in this way, is to find some really decent reference. And I love me some cosplayers. You know, cosplayers, I let them do the legwork. You know, a lot of these cosplayers, which make you know, these screen accurate versions of these costumes, they do a lot of this work already, and you know, promote this work on their web pages and show off the work that they've done. And in the end, a lot of it is kind of done for me, in that, you know, they've already worked out where the suits came from, or, you know, what was used for this and what was used for that when they made the original films. Now, it is worth noting that while Poe Dameron does wear a flight suit as well, he has got something that is I would say, reminiscent of what Luke wears. It actually is not the same suit. So you got to remember that, not only had 35, 40 years passed between the filming of A New Hope and The Force Awakens, but it's also 35 to 40 years in universe of time being passed, right? Han is obviously much older in this film. So time has passed here too, and you would presume that they also had advancements in how they were doing things. Clothing changes rather quickly in the way that it's designed and put together and stuff like that. So when you're going about doing one of these uniforms, doing one of these costumes, it really is important that you pick which one precisely you're going to do. When I look at the differences in these costumes, so one of the really big differences that I see, the first kind of really big thing that pops up to me, is the kind of control panel that Luke's got on his chest. I think in universe that's supposed to be something to do with his respiration. It's supposed to be his breathing panel. Vader wears something similar strapped to his chest as well. And when you look at Luke's got the hose kind of dangling down from that, and it goes around to his back. And I think it actually attaches. You can see it kind of a little bit here. I think it actually attaches in the leg where this thing goes. And so that's there. That's a really good look at it. And so, yeah, that's kind of where this hose goes, goes into the suit kind of that way. When you look at Poe Dameron, however, Poe Dameron's tube, that's not what I wanted. Poe Dameron's tube actually goes into, there's kind of a crescent shaped pocket here with a over panel kind of sewn into the fabric there. And this is something that is unique to Poe's and would be one of the things that we see as being an upgrade or a variation of the costume. So this is kind of one of the things that we want to pay attention to. We want to make sure that if you're doing the Poe Dameron version of this, that the only reference you're looking at is Poe Dameron. And if you're doing the Luke version of this, if you're going back to Empire Strikes Back or anything like that, then you only want to use the Luke variation of this costume. You also, and again, this is kind of a word of note or of warning, you also want to make sure that you are being very careful when it comes to things like fan-made costumes and cosplay. And the reason for that is that you're taking for granted if you just, I'm gonna use this gentleman's costume, and that's what I'm gonna reproduce is that gentleman's costume. I don't know. I'm not an expert in this. I don't know exactly how accurate he got his costume. And as a result, any mistakes that he made, I would then, make them into my own costume as well, which I would want to avoid, right? So while I do use a lot of cosplayers when it comes to, looking at where things go, this is more about just being able to get more photographic reference. And I cross-reference this as best I can. I'm always going to look at this versus what I see in photographs. Now, if I'm not mistaken, this image of Luke here is actually from the holiday special, which I would probably avoid. I don't know how accurate anything in that is compared to everything else. But you do run into a few things where there are discrepancies, where there are inaccuracies. This looks like an actual pretty close reproduction of the suit here. This is on Etsy. And what you're going to get here is probably someone selling this sewing pattern, which would be a really good, if we were able to get that pattern, that would be a really, really, really brilliant, you can see here, really, really brilliant way of being able to reproduce this. And they're probably going to have, you can see here, there are 3 variations within this pattern of someone using this. And so I have done this in the past where being incredibly accurate is important. Where I will, go and buy one of these patterns where someone's done the work for me already, in order to make sure that I'm being as accurate as I can once I find something like this. Other than that, it's going to be a lot of photographic reference, looking at costume A, costume B, and kind of back and forthing until I can get to a point where I'm just absolutely pleased with how accurate things are. You know, looking at really nice, big, high resolution images, to be able to kind of see like, oh, okay, yeah, there's totally a pocket here, but it looks like it goes right down to the elbow. There's also kind of something going on with his sleeve here. It looks like an insert with a window on it, and kind of identify where pockets are and where things are. Again, using as accurate a version of this as I can, which is really really important. Now, before I jump into actually creating anything, I also wanted to kind of show a little bit of a more finished version of this, kind of where I would be aiming to go when I make this. And so this is the flight suit that I created for the Mandalorian when I created my Star Wars project. This is the sewing pattern that I generated here when I created his costume. And one of the things that I wanted to point out here when it comes to Marvelous Designer and it comes to using this software is that I'm rarely perfect when I use it. One of the things that I see a lot of people trying to do is just using Marvelous Designer, exporting it, and calling it done. And that rarely, if ever, does that ever happen. You know, there's so much you're going to need to clean up and tweak and edit, re-sculpting things inside of ZBrush and getting it to a point where it does work correctly. This is the finished version of the suit that I ended up exporting from here for Mando, and I wanted to just point out how imperfect a lot of this is. You know, some of the things that I really really like that I got from this were the layering in the back here, where you can actually see wrinkles from the jacket going underneath the vest. And you can see there's things like there's a weird pinch in the vest here in the front. This is because I actually brought Mando's armor into the software as well, using it as a means of just squishing the fabric down against the character to make sure that it would actually fit inside. Even though when I got down to it, you can see that his sleeves here are just absolute garbage. There's nothing of use here. There's all kinds of little bubbling and artifacting here from the way the simulation was done. I didn't really care about that. When I actually made this for production, when I was actually getting rid of the bits that I didn't need, his actual sleeve ended where his vambrace did, where the actual armor on his arm ended. And so there wasn't a lot of need to have the fabric underneath the area where it didn't belong. And so you end up with kind of a lot more than you actually needed. And that results in a lot of like weird pinching and kind of stretching and stuff like this. Again, you can see very clearly where his leg armor ended up, pinching directly on that part of his leg. And so there was a little bit of sculpting on ZBrush, you know, to correct some of the shapes and correct some of the forms and things like that that had occurred. But yeah, this is essentially what I exported out in order to bring into to the software, the modeling package, to start cleaning up and producing something that could be used in games. So yeah, not nearly as clean, I think, as a lot of people would have you believe. So I'm going to go and reset Marvelous here, and I'm going to go and import my character. Now, it is important to note that when I do this, I am importing an avatar that has already been scaled correctly inside of 3ds Max. Marvelous Designer is a physics simulation package, and physics determines, or is dependent rather, very heavily on scale. So imagine, if you will, trying to simulate clothing on something like a G.I. Joe action figure versus trying to simulate something on the Statue of Liberty, right? The scale of those two things are very, very different. And because of that difference, it's going to treat the fabric different. So what I've done here is I've got a human being that is scaled to be about 6 feet tall. Depending on what you're doing with the character, you know, if you were trying to make a reproduction of Mark Hamill in his flight suit, then maybe looking up, you know, how tall Mark Hamill is and making sure you're within, you know, kind of an inch or two of his height would be worthwhile. I'm going to be doing this as a little bit more of a generic kind of flight suit. And as a result, we're going to be using just a 6 foot tall avatar here. So this is my male avatar. Usually the first thing I do when I'm in Marvelous Designer, I'm not a really big fan of stark white on screen. I typically like things that are going to be a little bit easier on the eyes. Since what I'm doing here is for the character, but isn't really part of the character, I will typically go and make my avatar a darker color like this, so I can kind of almost tune it out, as it were, in order to kind of get to a point where I'm not really paying attention too much to my anatomy anymore. I'm worried more about the clothing at this point. So I'm going to need to open up some reference images here of Luke in his suit. I'm just going to go and save this image rather quickly, and we'll go. Let's see. I'll throw it on my desktop for now, which I'll go and that is saved as a web image, which is not at all useful. This happens on occasion when how people save their files. Let's see if this one save as. This is still a web image. So I'm really what I'm looking for here. It's not anything really specific in terms of the image. I just want to kind of have something on screen in terms of the this one, in terms of the image, so that while I'm putting together, there we go. There's a JPEG. Just so that while I'm doing this, I can kind of keep this on screen on the other monitor, just to be able to kind of see where some of the stitching is and where some of the lines are and things like that. So we'll minimize this window, and we'll start kind of throwing together a little bit of what this suit looks like. Again, I've got some images that I've captured from other places here. I've got other flight suits that I've used. This is a helicopter pilot flight suit that I really kind of enjoyed the look of, and it had some really interesting kind of lines in it and stuff. A lot of it really similar to what you see on Luke. And so I kind of will use this kind of off and on. You can see this one's got a folded collar here, which is not really what we're after. But in terms of the way that the flight suit is structured, I can see a little bit more of the pattern here and how that's going to work. So I'm going to kind of put a bunch of this stuff on my other monitor to leave open here as we kind of go through and start plotting this out. Okay, so I'm going to go into my 2D window, and I'm going to start off by using the polygonal draw tool. And I'm going to use the silhouette of my character, which is going to help me kind of place some of this stuff, in the places where I would like it to go. And I'm going to start off by creating the main body of the suit here. So I'm going to do this symmetrically. I'm going to want to have two panels here, left and right. And we're going to start by creating the collar. Now, when I'm creating these points here, I'm not worried about curvature. I'm not worried about things that are being round. I'm only just worrying about kind of the corner pieces, and I'll kind of jump back from there a little bit. Once I get to a point where, whoops, let's cancel that. And once I'm kind of pleased with where this is going. So maybe we'll pull this down here, and we'll go across, and I'll bring this back to the center point and up. So there is kind of now my first little bit of paneling. Again, this is going to be a full one-piece suit here, so I want to kind of keep in line with that. The next thing I'm going to do is adjust the color. Again, I don't really like the stark white of this. I'm not going to worry about what type of fabric we're dealing with yet. I'm not really going to start worrying about I'm not really going to start worrying about simulation or anything like that. My first goal is to just get this onto the character kind of reading the way that I want. So now that I've kind of got almost the first half of the costume, I'm going to go in and start adding some of the curvature that I know is supposed to be there. So we're going to go into the second tool here, and I'm going to go to the edit curve point, and I'll kind of start in the same place. I'll start with the neck, and I'm going to make this rounded, kind of like so. This should be maybe something a little bit like this. This is going to go kind of around his neck. So I'd like this to be as semicircle as possible. This is going to go up and across his shoulder. And then this line here, I can see I'm going to have to move this down a little bit. This is going to be the armpit in the front. So we're going to bring this in, something like that. I want to kind of have almost the side view of his arm here kind of present. So something a little bit like that. And then we're going to curve out the pants a little bit here too. This is going to give us some pretty nice wrinkling in that area. And I'm going to go back to the Edit Pattern tool. I'll choose the center line, right-click on it, and I'm going to unfold with symmetrical editing. So what this is going to do, the symmetrical editing, is it's going to allow me to, when I select a point and I move it, it moves that point on both sides simultaneously. So that makes editing the pattern a little bit easier. Now, I don't want to jump in and do a lot of extra details on this. We're going to kind of go and place this thing a little bit more accurately on the character here. I'm going to get it to the point that it's just kind of floating in front of him. The next thing that I want to do is I want to create the back of the pattern. So to do that, I'm going to right-click this, and we can do a couple of different things. We can either copy and paste it, or paste an inverse. So you can right-click and you can copy up here and paste, or you can mirror paste, which will invert your paste when you put it in, which is all I'm going to do. You can also Control-C and Control-V to do this. So this is going to become the back. Now, if we're looking at him from the front here, this is his right shoulder. It's on our left. But when we flip him around, his right shoulder is now aligned with us. So this is the right shoulder. So that means that this panel is actually backwards. We're going to rotate it around and place it on his back. And that's going to line it up with the other bit of his outfit here. And the other thing that I want to do is I don't want to have this giant scalloped neck here on the back. That's typically not the way that these things work. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this point and drag it up until it's straight here. You'll get a little bit of a pink line denoting that it's straight. And then I'm just going to go delete the curve points that were added to the front version. And we now have a kind of straightened back version. Now I can tell already looking at this that there's going to be a problem when I sew this together. And that problem is going to be with the sleeves here and the way that this is going to mesh. I can see that this corner and this corner are not going to give me a perfectly flat intersection. They're going to spike up. And this is something you kind of want to watch out for here. I'm gonna sketch on here in order to kind of illustrate what I'm seeing and why I want to be worried about this a little bit. So what you're going to see happen here is that when this line, this one, and this one, when they get sewn together, what we're going to see is we're going to see a spike like this in the middle, right? That's going to be these two corners put together. So this angle here and this angle here, that's the same piece. You can see that it's not straight. Now, what I would like to have for his armpit is a straight piece like this instead. So that means I actually need to get a little closer to 90 degrees here, if not wider, in both of these angles here. Otherwise, when they stitch together, it's going to create a pinch point that I'm not going to be able to get rid of. Okay, so I'm going to go and adjust that to try and get it as close as I can here. We're just going to drag this down. And I'm going to also go and get my curvature points and bring them up a little bit like so. So now when I see this point here, when I see that angle, when I'm looking at this here and this here, when I see those two things married together, I'm going to see a little bit more of this shape. And that's exactly what I'm after. That's going to produce a really nice armhole. Now let's do a very quick see how it fits. In order to do that, we're going to need to start sewing it together. So I'm going to go into segment sewing. This is going to let me sew one edge to another edge here. So I'm going to start with his shoulder. Closest to the neck is where I'm going to put our hash mark. And I'll put that hash mark on the same side here, closest to the neck. And I can go over to the 3D view here and double check that my stitching is perfectly straight lines. We want to avoid crisscrossing. Crisscrossing means it's going to sew it in a way that's not going to line up. So we want to make sure that this is nice and straight. We'll sew the armpit area together. We'll sew the side of the leg together. This is because of the symmetry doing both sides for us at once, which is quite lovely. And we'll sew the legs together like that. So that should be everything, at least on this initial panel here. I'm going to hit spacebar to simulate it. You can see we're going to have a problem here. We're going to undo to bring it back. And this time I'm going to hit spacebar and then hit it again rather quickly to try and go in and fix this a little bit. Now there is something else that you can do to try and alleviate this issue from happening, which is to use the placement points inside of Marvelous Designer. But I find sometimes you don't really need to do that. I'm going to go and reset this pattern here, and I'm going to bring it back around so that it's the right angle. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to bring them a little bit closer to his body to try and allow them to simulate a little bit better. So that worked a little bit better this time around. And now we've got the beginnings of our jumpsuit here. I'm going to try and fit it to him a little bit better. I can see that one of his legs kind of worked out quite nicely. The other leg is not so much. And so just a little bit of pulling here. We're going to pull that fabric back through his foot in order to make sure, come on you, there we go, that it's fitting the way that we want. Now, you're going to notice that it kind of looks a little bit like paper right now. And there are a couple of things that are making it look this way, that are kind of making it feel more like paper than anything else. The first is that our particle distance, okay, so this is in when I have any of my panels selected in 2D. The particle distance right now is reading 20, and this is in millimeters. So what that means is that our costume here is full of vertices, right? We have vertices making up all of the triangles that make up the costume like this. That 20 in millimeters that you see here is how far apart each of those vertices on the mesh happens to be from another vertex. And what that does is it allows us to set the density. So 20 millimeters means that every vertex is going to be 20 millimeters, thereabouts, from the next vertex. As they get closer together, you need more vertices to cover the mesh. So it starts getting higher in poly. So this number is actually an inverse of polygon count. The reason they do this is to avoid crashing the software by making things too high poly. So if you're to think of 3ds Max putting a turbo smooth modifier on something and increasing the iterations to, let's say, 17, you would kiss Max goodbye. It's going to try and subdivide that mesh until it runs out of memory and just closes. Marvelous gets around this by inverting the way that the numbers work. This way, as we reduce the number, the polygon count goes up, but only to a point. You won't be actually able to bring the vertices so close together that we start losing them. So because of this, the fabric is looking very kind of papery, and that has to do with just how big our triangles are. The other thing that is taking this into account, or that is affecting this, has to do with the actual fabric that we're using. So here I'm using just generic fabric number 1. This is the default fabric when I open the software that was present. And I haven't gone and given it any extra settings or preferences or anything like that. So because of that, we're also getting something that doesn't really feel all that awesome when we look at it on the character. Now, when I go and take a look at this, there's a few things I'm not overly pleased with. It looks like our armpits are flaring out too much. This is as a result of this one vertex on our mesh, this one corner point here, being too far out in this direction. If I bring it inwards like this, and I'm going to do this on both the front and the back, bring it inwards like this, and simulate again, you can see that that's going to fit him a little bit better. Now, the idea here, and again, I keep looking back over at Luke, trying to see how baggy the outfit is and just how many wrinkles and how far away from the character we're getting. You can see that we're kind of getting a little bit more jumpsuit in the way that this is fitting him here. That's okay. We're going to get back to that a little bit. We can go and scale this up and down if we want. The next thing that I would like to do is put some sleeves on this guy. And so I'm going to go and do that. I can see here too, I don't like this corner for the same reason the other corner did not appeal to me. I want to get that closer to a 90-degree angle. Maybe something like that. In order to be able to avoid any scalloping here. So here we can actually see the end result of why that doesn't work. I'm just going to simulate again. And this is what we're looking to avoid, right? What we want is that to go straight across like that. And again, the reason that that's happening is that we just have between this angle and the one on this side, this angle, we're just getting a little too much in there. So if I bring this back even further, you can see that we're going to get to a point where it eventually does straighten out. Now, I do want to also avoid, getting to a point where it's too high up on his shoulder. I'm also looking at Mark Hamill here to see where the suit fits him. I'm also looking at how far down his body that armhole is going, right? So I'm looking here. There's the top of the shoulder. There's where his armpit is. And there's where the armpit of the sleeve is going to go. So that's going to end up being a really big sleeve all the way through here if we do that. And so we don't want to do that. I probably want that sleeve to end up a little bit more like that. And so, that means we got to bring this up here. I'm drawing with my mouse, which is not working out really in anyone's favor. So I'm going to go and do that over here too. We'll go grab this point and I'm going to try and bring it up. And I'm bringing it up really just along the line here where it exists. I'm going to do both of these. And then we're going to go need to adjust that curvature again. Although it actually looks pretty decent. That may be just a little too high. Let's go down a little bit more. There we go. Okay. So not too bad in terms of the fitting now. Now we can go and create his sleeve. So I'm going to create a sleeve here. This is kind of just the way that I create sleeves all around. I'm going to switch from the polygonal tool to the rectangle tool. And I'm going to start at the top and drag this down. I'm looking at his sleeve here in terms, or his arm in this image here, trying to get the same kind of distance. And what I would like to do is I would like to kind of capture that same distance here. If I go and select one of these edges, we can see this is a 27.8 centimeter edge. And if I do the same at the back, we should be pretty close to the same distance, 26.8. So there's actually about a centimeter difference between the front and the back. And we would want this top piece to have the same kind of shape. I'm going to build the sleeve symmetrically. I'm just going to build the front and flip it over to create the back. But that's kind of what I'm going to be after here as well. Right now, I'm far too wide. I'm at 35. I'm going to end up creating quite a bit of curvature in this. So I'm going to make it actually a little bit too short. And I'm going to bring this down. Let's go to about here. And then we're going to add some curvature to this. So this is going to be the top of the shoulder. This is going to be the armpit. And the way that you want to think about this is that if we were looking at our character kind of from the side view here, if I go and rotate this gentleman this way, if you think about this, the sleeve has to come off this way and go down. But because the sleeve is unrolled, it's then going to go this way to create that other piece, right? This is going to get folded under that way. So the shape that we should get should look a little something like that, where these two pieces are going to get sewn together. And so that's what I want to create here. I'm going to do this with the add curvature point, and we'll arc the top up and arc the bottom in until we have that kind of nice S curve here. This is currently a 31.29 S curve, which means it's not the right size. So I'm going to bring this up until we're at the 27.28 mark. And we're going to go and adjust our curve points again because they don't line up anymore. And we're just going to kind of get close enough here like that. And then we're going to go and just bring the sleeve inwards just a little bit. We'll taper the arm a little bit like that. So I'll grab the center line, right click and unfold. And that'll give us the sleeve pattern here. Again, I can see there's a little bit of a dip in here. And this is because of my curve points again. I'm going to bring that down. So undo that move. And I'll bring this one down. Okay. And I'm just going to scale this up just a little bit and scale it out just a little bit. Again, I'm doing this looking at the length of this edge, so something like that. So let's go and now place this on his arm here. We're going to rotate it. Again, there are tools available in order to go and place this on the arm. You know, I can go and click on one of these buttons here, and it'll kind of line it up as close as it can get. I'll show you how to do this if you don't actually use these points, or if you don't actually have these points. I'll show you a little trick that you can use to line this up. So I'm going to go in, put this above his arm, kind of matching the same angle that's there. Now, if I sew the sleeve together, going in and sewing the left side to the right side, it's going to sew that into a tube, and it's not going to line up with his arm. So one of the tricks that I like to do, we're going to go to our segment sewing. We'll sew the front to the front, like so. And then we'll sew the back to the back, like so. And now when I simulate this, even though the sleeve isn't sewn together, it wraps around his arm in a way that those ends are actually now really close to one another. So if I turn off my simulation and now just sew the front to the back and simulate again, we get the sleeve on the arm here without really too much issue. Now, you may also have noticed that I only made a singular sleeve, which in this case is a little bit longer than we want it to be, so it's no big deal. We'll just bring this point up here a little bit more. There. I'm going to end up adjusting that as well once he has gloves on, but for now, that's kind of fit the way that I want it to. What I can go and do now is take that sleeve and duplicate it. So I'm going to take the rear pattern and I'm going to move it over to leave room for the sleeve here. We're going to copy, and this time I'm going to paste with R instead of with V, and that's going to flip the pattern over. So when you look at the sleeve, it's pasted a simulated sleeve. I can actually just go and move into the right place here, like so. And then we can go and sew it in. So front to front and back to back. I'll simulate, and that'll cinch up that sleeve. And now we have kind of the starting point of the suit. So there are a few things we should take a look at while at this point. First, my avatar that I've got here is actually a fairly buff gentleman. And we're seeing a lot of that actually show through his suit. I can see where his pecs are. I can see his abs. I can see his deltoids. And we can actually see the suit kind of being a little bit more form-fitting than you're probably used to seeing one of these suits. I'm going to go and look for the tension map so we can actually go and see wireframe, random colors, thick textured, opaque, monochromatic. Let's go into this one. Strain map. So what we're looking for here it is here, the strain map. This is going to show us how much tension is on the fabric. So baggy fabric, which you can see is down here in the blue, that means that the fabric is 100% the same size as it is in 2 dimensions, meaning it's not being stretched or contorted. When we get to anything up here, you can see around his armpit, we're getting a lot of red in here. Red is up at 120%, which means the fabric is being stretched in a way that's a little unnatural. This means that up here, which, as we could tell from looking at it earlier, the outfit's just actually a little too small on him. Now, this has to do a lot with my avatar here, not being, a regular everyday Joe kind of size. And we can go and edit this to fit him a little bit better. Ideally, you would like to have that if you're making a jumpsuit for a Star Wars character. You would actually want to have that. I'm going to move this out. I'm holding Shift, and I'm going to right-click once I move it out. I'm going to move this out 3 centimeters, like so. And I'll do the same thing with the back here. I'm going to move this out and right-click and hit 3 and enter. Move it out 3 centimeters. We're going to re-simulate again. And there, that's starting to look a little bit better. We're not getting so form-fitting in here. And again, eventually, once there's wrinkles like this, once I start bringing the suit up, you can see how that's going to work. Okay. So the next thing that I would want to do is kind of capture Luke's belt region here. It's a little hard to see here because he's got obviously kind of this seat belt type fabric wrapped around him as a belt. But there is a point in the orange fabric where it's being cinched in here a little bit. And that's kind of the next thing that I want to grab. So that's what this point was meant to be, was kind of the natural waistline of this jacket. So I'm going to go and create an internal line, which I'll start at that point and just drag it. I want this to be perfectly horizontal. And I'm going to add another one just above it. So maybe somewhere about there. So that's going to form the basis of his belt. Now, if I go and zoom in on this, while it looked to be pretty decent in 2D, I can actually see here in 3D that it's probably thinner than I want the belt to be. I probably want to move this one up a little bit more. I'm going to bring that point out here. You want to make sure that that is snapped to the outer edge. Okay, so now I'm going to do the same thing on the back. I want that belt to carry around. So we're going to go to internal polygon line again. And let's make sure we select the tool. We'll go in perfectly straight. And I'm using, again, that pink snap line to make sure that they line up identically. This is also why these patterns are just shifted over left and right and not moved up and down in any way. Okay, so this is going to give us that little bit of a belt area. Now, what I want to do is I actually want to pull that belt area in a little bit. I want to make it a little bit tighter on the body so that the suit kind of starts wrinkling in here. Now, you could do this by actually just adding some elastic to this thing and turning the strength up and the ratio down and simulating this, and it'll start actually kind of bunching in that way. You can see I actually had a little too much selected here when I did that. Let's try it with just the belt line. I'm going to undo a couple of times here till that elastic is gone. The elastic's off there and off there. Okay. So I just want to make sure that that elastic is on here and nowhere else. There we go. Okay. So that did a pretty good version of that. It looks like it's actually been sewn together and kind of cinching in around his waist in that area. The other thing that I could do, which is part of kind of adding a little bit more detail to this, if I go and take a look at I'm looking at the length of these lines. You can see the top one is longer and the bottom one's shorter. I want to find the shorter one. And this one is 23.36. And the one at the back is 23.36. They're identical, which makes sense. I copied and pasted. What I'm going to do is I'm going to create another piece of fabric we're going to sew to this one. I want to make sure that we stay on our thick fabric here. I'm going to go to the rectangle and I'm just going to click. And the width is going to be 23. Yeah, we'll just leave it 23. And then the height between these things, I'm going to kind of eyeball this. Not 550. We'll go 5. 5 looks to be about right. I'm going to hit OK. And this is currently half of the belt. We're going to go and select the middle line and unfold it. Then we're going to set this. I'm going to copy and paste it over here. So this is going to form, we'll grab the one in the front. This is going to form the kind of belt region. It's not the gray seat belt area, but it's just another piece of almost reinforced fabric on here that is going to help kind of hold this together. So we'll go and zoom in on this and put it in the right area here. And then all I'm going to do is I'm just going to stitch this to the other piece here. So from here to here, from here to here, that one to the top. And because this belt doesn't exactly match up distance-wise, it's a little bit smaller, it's going to also help in creating some of those kind of really unique and interesting looking wrinkles. I'm also going to make sure the belt is stitched to itself like that. So we'll simulate this. And that'll kind of help kind of flatten that in a little bit. Now it's bubbling out more again than we see on Luke. But this is, again, we're going to kind of edit the fabric in a way here that's going to give us a little bit more of what we're after. So this is kind of the beginnings of this here. This is kind of how I would approach building this suit with, going in, where did I lost my picture, Luke, going in and kind of, there we go. I'm just going to move this back over here. I inadvertently closed it. Going in and kind of just recreating each of these things as I see them, kind of thing. If I go to the front of the leg here, he's got a pocket that kind of ends at the knee. So one of the ways that I would do this is I would click on the leg. I can see where the top of the leg is now. We're going to use our internal shape. And I'm going to go right across there. I'm going to go down again. I'm trying to keep this at 90 degrees here. And we'll go down the leg, across and up. Now, if you find doing this absolutely painful and you can't make a rectangle in this way where, it looks and feels as 90 degrees as you can actually just make it 90 degrees like this. Like that. And then what you can do is you can go and select that one panel, and we can go and edit it. We can go and rotate it and then go and place it kind of exactly where you want it, scaling it up and scaling it down to match. I'm just going to eyeball this because it looks pretty close to what I'm actually after here. So I'm looking at Luke and trying to eyeball where the top of this pocket is. I'm going to bring this down a little bit. Just resimulate here to keep this going. Yeah, and I kind of actually like where that is. We're going to grab the entirety of this pocket here, copy and paste it, and I'm going to place another one down the leg a little bit further. Luke's got another pocket there. This one actually needs, I think it needs to go up a little bit. These might be a little oversized, but we'll get the idea here. So now that I've kind of got this placement for the pocket, in order to make the pocket, I'm just going to go and copy this. So we're going to right click and we are going to copy this thing as a pattern. So clone as pattern, and I'll put it outside here. And then I'm going to go and rotate this. I want this one to actually be straight. That's how the fabric would actually be tied up here. So we're going to line it up. And I might go and just move these vertices until I can actually use the pink tools here to line them up perfectly. Like so. Just so I make sure it is a perfectly 90-degree version of that pocket. And then all I want to do is kind of figure out how big I want this pocket to be in terms of the depth. So I would go in and you can see there's a line here, 22 by 13. I'm going to go and create another box kind of outside here. Let's turn that off. Just like this. And that's going to be how deep I want the pocket to be. So I'll take that and we'll copy it and paste it. And I'll put the paste over here. And then we can paste it again. I'll put it down here. Only this one we're going to rotate 90 degrees. And I will line up the bottom with the bottom. So this is all going to get sewn together here. Let's go and grab all of these pieces. And I'm going to move it in front of his leg so that it can get stitched together a little bit easier. So this is kind of how I go about doing the pockets. I still have to do the upper flap, the outside of the pocket. But all I'm going to do here is just sew this together like so. And then I'm going to sew these to the outer points of the pocket like so. We'll go and adjust our bottom one here and we'll simulate that. And you can see that that's going to go and create that kind of pocket type effect. I've got a couple other sewing angles to hit. And then the other thing that I would go and do on this, if you go and look at a folded paper bag. So if you go and look at the way that a paper bag is folded when you go to a grocery store, and you get these folds in it here on the side, I actually like to go and put those in the pocket as well, because it's kind of the way that you would want the fabric. I'm actually feeling my own cargo pants here that I'm wearing at the moment, and they kind of have that same kind of edge, right? It's a triangle at the bottom with a center edge that goes up that you see in that kind of thing. Cargo pants have the same thing. So what I would want to do is I would actually want to sew it the same way. I'll fold that up so that it actually does kind of make the pocket actually fold. So if I go and do an internal line here again, We're going to start at the center point of this and bring it down. And then finish it by going to the corner and then just finishing the line that way. So there's kind of that fold line, which I'll go and copy and paste inside of this one. And I just want to make sure these edges don't ever leave the internal shape. And then I'm going to go and give some folding to these. So these are all going to fold internal. We're going to bring up our fold strength a little bit and bring this down. We'll go and make sure that it's folding the right way. It's not. It's going inwards. We wanted to go larger. I'm just going to change simulation modes here. That kind of forces an update in the software to make it reset the angles. But yeah, you can see now we're kind of getting something that folds a little bit more like a pocket. And then to put the upper bit of the pocket on here, we already have our line here. We just kind of need the actual top bit of the pocket. So I'll go and make a rectangle that's about the right height. And I'm just going to position this here so that it's in the right place. So I'll just make sure that this is where it should be. And I'll go and stitch that line here. Again, we'll move this as close as we can get it so that when it simulates, it doesn't just snap and go to the wrong place. But it'll do that kind of thing. So you can see we're getting a pocket that is naturally trying to flip open. Again, we can fix that by adding some folding strength here to this. We're going to bring that up and we're going to bring that down and we'll simulate. Again, I'm going to change the tools with which I'm simulating here. Kind of force that along. Now, presumably there's something that actually holds Luke's pants pocket closed. I can see these here. This is probably the wrong angle I've got. I always get these backwards. Bring this down. There we go. So that'll help fold it down. So what I typically do is add a little bit of a Velcro piece here. And I'll do that with the internal rectangle. And all I'm going to do, whether you want this to be visible or not, I'm just going to make a little rectangle like this that I can go and paste into the other pocket like this, or the other component of the pocket. And then all I'm going to do is I'm just going to free stitch all the way around that and all the way around the other one. I know this orange color and that stitch color made it really hard to see, but this will allow me to kind of adjust the way that this pocket is being done here so that I can ensure that it stays closed. Now, sometimes you actually do get Velcro on pockets or whatnot. The reason I use a rectangle is that right now you can see it's flaring open in a way that I don't want. Well, that becomes real easy to fix if I just take these and move them out the length of the pocket. I can adjust the length of attachment point on the pocket to get it to line up a little bit better, kind of thing. So let's talk about our fabric here now. I'm obviously not getting exactly the kind of fabric that I would want. It's still kind of looking a little kooky. So this is where I would start kind of adjusting things in terms of the pattern that I've got here. I would go and grab this first fabric. I'm going to go into my presets and I'm going to go and try denim at first. We're going to use raw denim and we're going to see what kind of effect that does. Now, right out of the gate, it doesn't really seem to do a lot for the costume, but you got to remember that that's only half of the equation. The other half is starting to lower this down. So I'm going to bring it down by half from 20 down to 10 between each set of vertices. Now, when I do that, we're going to start seeing the wrinkles get a little bit smaller and the pleats starting to get a little bit thinner. So one of the things that I can see here is that, again, it's starting to fit a little bizarre in the arm, right? I'm starting to see his musculature through. I'm also starting to see a little bit of his manhood through here, which is not something that is present on Mark Hamill, right? This is starting to feel a little bit too bunched in and not baggy enough in that way. Very form-fitting in the bum. Again, all of this is just because these panels are a little bit too small. So if I were to look at our our stretch map here again, you know, again, we can see that in the crotch, we're getting some really ugly red colors, which we would like to avoid. And so that's where we want to kind of start to tone this up a little bit. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab in the edit pattern mode here, I'm going to grab everything that is on the left, or sorry, on the right side of the rear, and I'm going to pull it out just a little bit. We're going to bring this out, let's say 4 centimeters. Now that's going to screw up my entire pattern here. We're going to move his pocket over as well. We'll just move it over here, get it out of the way for now. And I'm going to do the same thing here. I'm going to grab everything that is on the left side of the front and move it out the same distance here, like so. And I need to do the belt as well. 4 and 4, because it widened everything. And we can start kind of tailoring this to the model a little bit better. Again, presumably you're not going to have somebody as beefy and as cut as my avatar was. And so you'll get something that kind of fits a little bit more natural once you start doing this. So that's not too bad. Again, there's some places here where the pants are kind of going through themselves. And so I would just like to kind of adjust that a little bit. Now, we're going to go through and kind of talk about some of the tips here. I'm not going to go through and do the whole costume. You kind of get the idea. I'm going to go through kind of bit by bit like this, picking out and grabbing all of the areas where I want things to happen. You can see we're starting to get some really nice wrinkles in the arm here, some nice pleats and stuff going on. I want to talk about some of the tricks, some of the things that we can use to make the fabric look better while we're simulating and what have you. So the first trick that we're going to do is to grab the entirety of the costume. Now, again, I do this once I'm done the entirety of the pattern. I wouldn't do this midway through. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to right click on it. Let's use the pattern editing. And I'm going to go to clone as internal shape. Or sorry, layer clone as under. And what this is going to do, it's going to clone the entire costume. It's going to duplicate everything that you've made. And what it's going to do is it's going to sew all of these duplicates inside the original ones. Now, it may seem kind of goofy to do this, but the end result is that there's fabric inside fabric. And when you simulate that, what you're going to see it kind of hiccup here for a second as it kind of tries to find itself. What that's going to do is it's going to actually start to make the fabric feel a little bit more physically real. So you're going to start seeing that the fabric is actually, it's almost like instead of being on a naked person, there's actually an undersuit or another layer underneath here. I'm just going to make sure that everything internal is internal. We'll pull that out. A little piece here too. And so, yeah, so this is kind of the idea. And you can see where this does a really good job. You can see his sleeves, right? We're not only seeing the wrinkling on the sleeves, but I can actually see wrinkling from the internal fabric that is then pushing up against the external fabric. And it kind of gives you a little bit of a layer of realism on your clothing. And I don't need to export this one. When I go and create my low poly, I just delete that. I don't care what it is. And yeah, we can go and kind of adjust this all the way through here, making sure that none of that inner piece of fabric is showing. The other thing that I'm going to do is called seam taping. Now, seam taping is taking the seams and actually making them a little bit more rigid and pronounced. This is really useful for really making sure that those lines kind of appear where you want them to. So yeah, so if you look at this, you can see how much of an effect that's having on the outfit, and even just in terms of the way that the seams are appearing, right? You actually get what looks like fabric being sewn to itself. So we're getting something that's looking a lot closer to that kind of outfit now. So if I go in and do seam taping now, we're going to go to edge select here, and I'm going to start doing this. I'm not going to do it on the clones. We're going to do it on just the main outfit here. So I'm going to go and grab just around the leg, the arm, all the way around this panel here. And I'm going to right click, actually not right click, it's over here in the property editor. I'm going to go to seam taping and I'm going to turn that on. And as soon as I do, you're going to see a little bit of a thickness up here in and around that panel. I think this orange is a very unfortunate color to have at the moment. I'm going to switch it over to gray. So you can see the seam taping's default color is orange, which is why I wanted to change that. So if I go and switch this over to gray and we kind of look at this now, you can see that seam taping is showing up here. And what it allows you to do is it allows you kind of to almost like make the seams a little bit more rigid than the rest of the fabric. So here we've got some seam taping turned on and we can adjust the width of it. I'm going to go and bring it up to 20, the maximum. We'll let it adjust here and you should see it kind of pop out a little bit more like so. And then I'm just going to simulate again. And what that's going to do is it's going to have a very strong effect on wherever the outfit is kind of sewn to itself. And it'll kind of help keep those corners together. So this is how you can get things like, you can see the sleeve is now actually becoming a little bit of a corner. And I just did it on the front panel here, but you kind of get the idea as to what it's doing. Again, we're getting some of that internal pattern show through here, and I just want to make sure that's not the case. Now there is a layer system, but they recommend you actually turn it off. And so even if you turn it on and you say, I want this one to be outer and this one to be inner, as soon as you turn it off, this all happens again. So just a little bit of playing here to get that back to the way that it should be. And yeah, that's going to start giving you a little bit more of a solid effect here. So the only other thing that I would want to adjust here now, I'm looking at this and it's starting to feel a little bit more like a snowsuit and a little bit less like Luke's denim outfit. So I'm going to go into the fabric and instead of denim raw, I'm going to go switch this. Let's try denim stretch and we'll see what kind of effect that has. So again, I'm going to wait for it to update. Doesn't seem like it's had that much of an effect. Let's try cotton. I'm going to go with Oxford cotton. It seems like we're not actually getting an update in the fabric here. I'm going to make sure that this is applied to everything. And we'll simulate again. Not too bad. I can also go down here and change the thickness of the fabric as well. Yeah, that's not too bad. I think I might create an additional fabric to make that belt seem a little bit more rigid than it is. But that's kind of the idea, is to go through and start adjusting this here until it starts looking more and more like that outfit, starting to get your pattern adjusted. He's got a collar on that's going to need to be created. I can see that his just the opening where his collar is too wide. This is probably because I made everything thicker. And so I would need to go and bring this in, right? I'm going to just bring it in sideways here. It should be a perfect hole for his neck, or a perfect circle for his neck. And we'll just simulate that again. And that should give me just enough in here, right, that I can see where that collar is going to go. And so yeah, it looks like I could probably go and reduce the width of his legs. Right, it looks like we're getting really, really, really wide in the legs here, and that would need to be cinched in a little bit. He's got boots too, so this would all be pinched in under the boots, and not really something I would worry about there. Again, that fabric is still not sitting well with me here. We'll try a couple of different variations of this. And let's go and delete the internal clone. It may not be something that's completely needed at this point. Yeah, I think with this, it actually looks a little bit better without that internal. It's just becoming a little bit too much like a snowsuit without it. And so, yeah, that's kind of the idea here. You can see that we're seeing a little too much of his butt crack. Part of the reason for that is that, well, he didn't actually have underwear on when I simulated this. So any of the shape that we're seeing here is just going to kind of go through and show through. But that's kind of the gist of it. I'd go through and keep adding all the pockets on here. I would start cinching in the sleeves. So wherever his gloves are going to go, which would be about here on this, we can go and start cinching that in. So I'm going to create an internal line. Like this. And I don't want full strength on that. I actually want it to become elastic. So we'll turn on the elastic. We'll simulate this again. And the idea is to start bringing that in tighter on his wrist. Now, the actual suit doesn't have this, right? But this is going to emulate the kind of wrinkles you get from the fabric being pulled into his sleeve. And so I'm going to kind of just bring this down here a little bit like that. And then we can go and copy that and paste it on this one. Again, I want to make sure that I keep my edges where they should be on the outside here. And again, what this is going to allow me to do, if I simulate this, it's going to start giving me the effect, the look of that glove actually being pulled tight on the fabric here. Now, if you wanted to simulate the gloves, you could do that too. You could actually go and have that in there and actually pull on the fabric. But this is often all you're really going to need to do when it comes to that. He's got a boot down here. So we could go and do the same thing here, right? Create that internal line. Go straight across his pant leg here. Now this one's going to be a little bit dicier to create. And the reason for that is that we're going to need to match it up exactly in the front and back. But we'll do the same thing here too. We'll turn the elastic on. We'll bring this down. We'll simulate. And these should then cinch in tight against his legs. Now they're actually in different places on his legs. One boot is down low and one boot is up high. And so we would need to make sure that that gets captured the right way too, which would be removing this symmetrical editing. So you would right click on this and remove linked editing here in order to make them separate. But yeah, that's kind of the idea behind it, right? And then, you get it back into that nice orange color in order to kind of make it match what you're doing and, start making the white vest on top and that kind of thing. So yeah, that's kind of it when it comes to doing this type of stuff. These jumpsuits, they're used a lot in the Star Wars universe and you have them kind of all over the place in terms of the way that they're put together and the way that they've been used on characters. But that's kind of my process for going through and doing this. It's just a matter of reproducing what you see in the image, trying to get those wrinkles to lie the right way and fall the right way, making sure that your panels are kind of sitting the way that you wanted them to. Sometimes I'll go and create the undergarments on the character as well, so that, you don't get this hungry bum effect, and then you get that kind of just straight fabric going across. If your avatar is actually just sculpted with underwear, it actually makes it a little bit easier even to do that still. But yeah, that's kind of my process. And so I hope this has been helpful. I hope this answers your question, Senior Peppy Jr. Dude, I would love to see you put this together. I would love to see what you have once you flesh it all out. And so post an image or a link to your video when you get it put together, and let's see what you got, my friend. Until next time, everybody, keep on working on stuff, keep on plugging away, and I will catch you in the next video.